way. But at the moment, of course, Australia wants to move as a country rather than state by state.
Yeah.
And obviously issues of Victoria are delaying that.
But I mean, so like Australia...
And the ones with Victoria are interesting because as a transit, so New Zealanders, there's 600,000 of them that have rights to come back to New Zealand. So they fly into Australia. Well, they're bringing the virus and then all of a sudden they're mixing with the Australians, then hopping on a plane and then coming here. It's not very fair that New Zealand is seeding up Melbourne, Australia, before they get back here. And we need to make a much better job of it because we need to be able to fly to different places of the world and pick up passengers and bring them back. It's important because if we seed one person in Australia on a transit because we haven't tested them and then we catch them at the border here, that's not fair on Australia. That's not being a good bubble partner.
Has maybe 100 new cases a day at the moment. But you look at the likes of the United States that has tens of thousands of new cases every day. Under your current bubble criteria...
So America has decided that 6% of the population, or 0.6%, we're 42% over about 43 different states. So the deaths are happening in old and senior care establishments. So unfortunately, they've got the worst of both worlds where they have to go back, but they have to cope with the virus. And I really feel for America at this time.
The US doesn't have a chance of reopening travel with New Zealand anytime soon. So I really want to know, what is the time frame for some of those other countries?
Yeah, I made in my News Road newsletter a point that you could have one person who pays $10 billion, and that's not bring $10 billion in to invest in New Zealand. They hand it over at the border and they get citizenship. And then you have 10 people that hand over $1 billion each. So there's another 10 billion. So that's 20 billion all up for 11 people coming into this country. And then under that, you have 100 people that pay $100 million, hand it over. They don't get to spend it here. That's an entry fee. And so for 111 people, you've got $30 billion. Now, that's the sort of innovative thinking that New Zealand can do. And it's easy to analyse that. It's much harder to have 600,000 New Zealanders flocking through. The idea that the teachers come in first and the skills that we need, and we invite and we fly and we bring people in, it's a brilliant idea. So these are the sort of things. And the other thing is that there's a lot of rural areas with marae which need development. And so people that are coming in from overseas, they have accommodation in those locations, and it's building projects and plans can happen at the most rural marae settings throughout New Zealand. And once all of that's been built and the plumbers and that sort of stuff has been done, then the movement about where else in New Zealand to move to can take place.
If indeed a vaccine doesn't come into fruition.
And again, I make the same point that I made earlier, Jack. We shut our borders.
That's his name, Jack.
And New Zealanders supported us shutting our borders when there were roughly 240,000 cases.
So young Jack is he's quizzing the Prime Minister.
And now there are 10 million. So you're asking me at the height of a pandemic, which actually in some parts of the world hasn't yet completed surging around border reopenings. And what I'm saying is that there are countries where we are seeing a similar strategy to New Zealand, where the potential is there, but we have to make sure that we don't lose our position.
So one of the things, what about a constitutional change where we extend our electoral period to 4 or 5 years? So these are some of the things going into this next election, because once you have a stable government for 5 years or 4 years, that is an important thing, especially going into the next 20 years of a depression with regards around COVID. So these are structural things that one needs to look at going into this next election. So that's why I've done this video, and that's why I'm going to be circulating it, so that some good sound ideas on enlarging the foundation of New Zealand can cope with 190 million people buffeting our borders with regards to the resources and the climate we have here.
Because the United States is operating with restrictions. We don't want to be in that place.
No one is suggesting that you open the borders today. No. What I'm asking for is a time frame, though.
Yes,
I mean, it's 3.5 months since you closed the borders. So at what point do you say this is no longer sustainable because the vaccine is not a guaranteed promise.
And again, all I'm saying is that you're asking me to answer a question around a pandemic that has not finished peaking yet. And the flip side of also what you're suggesting is simply if it takes too long, we should open the borders and choose to change our strategy. I don't accept that. Countries that have done that have paid the price in other ways.
So what if we don't get a vaccine?
If I could just finish that.
Yeah, so we can battle about do we open or out. It's common sense that we use the advantage of having no virus and buffering and beefing up with regards to that. So that's something that is a no-brainer. I'm going to skip towards the end of this.
They may have open borders, but
so
they do not have a fully functioning economy.
We can get through to the end here. There's some good questions that start here because I want to make this video 17 minutes so far.
Just not going to support the program that you have, and that's the democratic system we have. On child poverty, I'll challenge you on that. The 7 out of 9 indicators, we have made progress.
Yeah, one of the things I'm a fan of is the gold and silver standard. And so silver for the rural environments and gold for the city. We need to have a way where the people that are living and finding, they can live in a rural environment and enjoy learning to grow food and riding horses and having the New Zealand lifestyle. We're getting people crammed into inner cities and living in garages and living in cars and that sort of thing. We need to have a radical redress of that. Yes, we can still have the New Zealand fractional reserve fiat currency, which is got the Queen's head on it and some famous people from New Zealand, but we also need to have gold and silver. My idea is to bring in the food and water into New Zealand in exchange for gold bullion and silver bullion. It's important that we have a means of exchange globally where those that put their hands up and say, look, can you please feed us? We will exchange gold and silver for it. And then we're able to then negotiate and put that at the top of the line and share those resources. So we need to think long and hard with regards to the currency that we work through in dealing with New Zealand
we have
trade.
Tens of thousands of children out of poverty, and we are not finished.
The top line from Statistics New Zealand.
There was a question in here with regards to the Prime Minister earns over 400,000 and having the same tax rate at the 72. My tax program is the first dollar anyone earns in New Zealand in a year is tax-free. And there's a linear line that goes all the way up to 100%, it's say $1 million. So the area, and it's a straight line, the area under that graph will give the Prime Minister her close to 500,000. And then every dollar after that million is taxed at 100%. And that's a very fair way of doing it. Everyone knows what it is, and we go ahead with regards to income tax. And we bring back GST. And we use income tax and we progress from there. And we really want an income tax level that brings in about 20% of GDP into the coffers for government to run it. And so if we're able to raise that out to 2 million, then we can, or 4 million or 8 million, we can move that top rate of 100% out further. And it encouraged the wealthiest people in New Zealand to grow the economy and put more carriages on the economy. And that's what we want. We need an incentive for growing the economy.
And releasing
But we also need an incentive of not overproduction as well. Like when Theresa Gatting became $5 million a year to run telecom, while the Prime Minister's on $500,000. No, the Prime Minister is the person that is the highest paid person in New Zealand in this COVID environment. And so from 1 up to 100% on $1 million, and then that means the Prime Minister is the person who is the highest paid person in New Zealand.
Child poverty statistics is that there has been no...
And that is the way that the Prime Minister should lead, honestly. We're in a COVID environment. All of those people here, you get the option. Oh, well, there's other jobs overseas, and if you want to try your luck with the pandemic, then of course you'll get more money overseas. But we need to re-look at our taxation system, okay, to abolish the extremes of wealth and the extremes of poverty.
Material hardship change under your watch, with you being the Minister for Child Poverty Reduction.
I'm going to stop you there. Material hardship is one measure of poverty.
A significant measure.
It measures. Let me finish. Material hardship is a significant measure. It measures, though, a survey of whether or not our children are getting enough fresh food on the table 3 times a day, whether or not they have multiple.
So why I want to see GST go back to zero is so that the food that's on that table doesn't have GST paid on it. And why I want to get a progressive tax rate up to 100%, so that when somebody sells a farm or something of that nature, which they got when it was 100,000 and now it's over $5 million, obviously that year's capital gains is going to be $5 million. And so the coffers are filled with that sort of activity. So we don't want the person selling the farm. We've changed the laws where the farm is sold and it's divided amongst 4 children on the actual death of the parents, for example. Well, maybe it should go to the oldest child who then looks after the 3 on the farm. And so you're not diluting and diversifying simply because you want to maintain that functional productive unit. And so by having a tax rate that goes up to 100%, it means that you're not getting this situation where everything's being eroded and turned to dust. And so that's what I would suggest is GST going back to zero, and we use a progressive taxation rate to cover the GST income.
Pairs of shoes, whether they share a room. Yes, it's a significant measure.
Now, the other thing is the cigarette smoking. I mean, the price of that, which is an inflationary thing. Look, go to your doctor, get a prescription. It's $1 packet of TaylorMades. Watching people picking up butts, because a butt's worth about 50 cents now on the street, and the transmission of communicable diseases, everyone should be able to buy a packet of TaylorMades and then not have to worry about roll your owns and all of that sort of thing, or sharing and stuff like that. That's one of the biggest health things that the Cabinet should look at,